Welcome to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share. All ideas, thoughts, and statements are those of the guest and the host of Echo Oscar Delta, and not of Navy EOD or Navy as a whole. Today on the podcast, I have Joseph Shaffer III and Dr. Paula Greene, the authors of Unsung, Quiet Voices of the US Navy's EOD Warriors and Their Families. Before we get into the details of the book, please give us a little about each of your backgrounds.
Sure. We both taught at Northern Arizona University. Paula much longer than I did, 18 years. I'll let her describe her own background. Let's see, I was in the military in the Air Force and from 1970 to 1974. I did a tour as an Air Force medic in Vietnam as my first duty station, and then my last couple of years at Williams Air Force Base in Arizona, which no longer exists. I taught history at Northern Arizona University and was the director of the honors program. And that's pretty much, I guess, the basic background that's relevant to the book story. Go ahead.
Okay. And I have taught off and on for 43 years, from preschool children to university. I sometimes say there's not a lot of difference between those two age groups. Taught education. I have two sons who are active Navy duty, and I spend a lot of time now in retirement working on this book, marketing this book, volunteering in the community, and doing whatever I can do to support my sons and our grandchildren.
That's awesome. With the marketing side and whatnot, we've talked a few times before this. First of all, I'm glad we can actually make this happen, because it seems like we've tried for a while now, and just things didn't quite work out. But here we are. But yeah, in our conversations up to now, I always learning, right, throughout life, whether it's EOD or otherwise. I didn't realize how hard some of this could be until I started talking to you about one, just coming up with the book, getting it down on paper, getting it published, marketing it. Y'all have went through a lot just to try and get this out. So I appreciate that effort that y'all put in.
Thank you. We're glad to hear that. We started this project about a half an hour, it seems like, before the COVID pandemic began. We started in January of 2020, and we'd hoped to, once the project sort of solidified in our collective minds and we had permission from Big Navy through Nav Info East to go forward with the project, we didn't have any idea that we were going to be conducting all of our interviews pretty much over the phone or through some of the internet streaming services. We'd hoped to actually do interviews face to face, and that would have meant traveling, obviously. And so with the onset of COVID in January or February of 2020, that really wasn't feasible for us. So that really changed the nature of the project from the outset. Maybe in some ways it helped a little bit, but it certainly meant less travel and was an unanticipated roadblock for us. But we were pumped about doing the project. We thought it was a valuable idea. We certainly had support from command, and Paula will probably talk a little bit more about that. And so once we got started, it was about 2.5 years before we actually had the manuscript complete and ready to be uploaded and printed.
Truly. We were also thrilled that people opened up their hearts, their experiences, 100% to total strangers. Joseph talks about that a lot. We didn't know, most of these people. And the volunteering part of it was tremendously enhanced by commands West Coast and East Coast. We're so grateful, to the people involved to allow us to get the word out so that both family members and warriors could come forward and volunteer. But not knowing us, just that they told their stories with such devotion and emotion, as you can
Yeah.
well imagine. It, you know, we were humbled continually. We laughed, we cried during the interviews, after the interviews,
Mhm.
as we were transcribing. We had over 1,000 pages of transcription.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, you know, just an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, and we really want to say thanks, and as we did in book in the acknowledgement section, to Oscar Rojas and um, Rick Hayes and Mark Britton and Brian Juergens. They really helped spread the word within the community itself, and then of course
Kara,
Kara Handley and Mary Smith.
yes.
They both did a
The
great job
PAOs.
for us. But there's also the folks within the community. It's the word of mouth that really helped us talk to a lot of folks. So I might have a conversation with one person, and then he would say, "You need to talk to so and so at Great Lakes," and that's how. I mean, it just the network is so obviously tight knit, and there are so many connections within your community that helped us a great deal. We would like to have interviewed 100 people, but then we'd have a 2,000-page manuscript.
Yeah.
So the number of folks that we interviewed probably turned out to be just about right.
Mhm.
Nice. That's great. Starting with how or why you wanted to write the book. How did that process kind of play out for you?
Right.
Do it.
Okay. So let me just say three things. Well, let me say these three things, and I'll turn it over to Joe, because I think you've got this down pat in
Okay.
terms
Yeah,
of,
whatever.
you know, what
I'll
happened.
make stuff up.
One, we wanted to inform. There are so few people who know about Navy EOD, who know about EOD. I mean,
Right.
obviously, there was an award-winning movie several years ago for EOD, The Hurt Locker, which was, you know, in terms of accuracy of EOD experience. But Navy EOD is just the big unknown. And there's many
Right.
good reasons for that, certainly. Um, so we wanted to inform, because this is a very special community. Secondly, we wanted to honor. There is not enough information out there about what our military does, what all of our special forces do. And Navy EOD, being such a small community, is literally unknown, even among big Navy. You know,
Is what
there,
we've heard.
right. There are sailors who don't know what the, you know, crab insignia is.
Right.
And then thirdly, we wanted to raise funds for the two foundations who support both the warriors and their families, NSOF and EOD Warrior Foundation. But specifically, Shaffer,
What was the question again?
how did this begin for
How did
us?
it
Why?
begin? Well, we'd gone to an awards ceremony at Imperial Beach in 2019, and we had the opportunity to meet Oscar Rojas there at that ceremony, and then spend some time with some of the young folks. Well, for us, young folks from Mobile Unit 11. You see, I'm rocking my Mobile Unit 11
Nice.
sweatshirt this morning. And we were impressed with them in a number of different ways. First of all, their commitment to what they were doing was clear and obvious. Secondly, they seemed like incredibly bright and motivated people. We got to meet some family members, which was special. And as we were driving home, we said to each other, we need to try to find out more about this community and what they do. And so I started fooling around on the internet and looking for some nonfiction books. We're both kind of bookish people, having been in the education racket for all of our adult lives. And we couldn't find anything really. We found lots of videos, mostly produced by the Navy, which were interesting and informative. But if you didn't know what you were looking for, you couldn't find it, I guess. So at some point I said to Paula, it would be nice if there was a nonfiction book out there about these folks, who they are, what they do, why they think the way they think, and maybe we should write a book about it. So, and then we discussed it and said, the other piece of the puzzle for folks within Navy EOD is the family, the wives, the moms and dads, the brothers and sisters, even the adult children. They really represent for the lack of a better term, the support foundation for you guys. And so the story without them is incomplete. So we wanted to do both. So sort of set up an arrangement where I would interview guys within the community. Paula would interview all of the other folks, the parents, the wives, the adult children, the siblings, in order to give, we hoped, a more complete picture about the commitment that's required and the sacrifices that are made.
As you were doing those interviews, how often did you have to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Please use a different acronym?
Well, for me, pretty much all the time. I mean, I think the Navy leads the world in acronyms. And having been in the Air Force 50 some years ago, I spent a lot of time Googling stuff that I had no idea what the hell it was.
Yeah.
And
hence the acronyms.
Yeah.
The back of the book.
At the back of the book, we have, I don't know what, there's 10 pages of acronyms or whatever. And that's not a complete list. That's only the list that appears in the manuscript. The list that I compiled for the 1,000 pages of transcript we have is probably 3 times that long. But that's an interesting comment, because I learned a lot about EOD. Now, what I know about EOD is about this much compared to what you guys do, but it was a real educational and learning experience for me. When I was talking, let's say, and I'll use his name because his name appears in the book, Scott Moneypenny, and he's talking about Mukasa and the Northern Arabian Gulf and all of these places in Iraq. We were aware of those things, but not specifically during the time. And so I'm checking geographic sources, I'm checking timelines and dates. And so pretty much every time I got a new acronym or a new geographic location in Iraq or Afghanistan, I'm going down the rabbit hole just to make sure that the information that I have is accurate, first of all, and then to try to gain some understanding of it. So it was an incredible experience. I don't have a lot of room left in my head for new information. So it was a pretty interesting experience for sure.
That's very cool. Looking at the back of the book with all the acronyms, it's interesting because on several of the teams that I've been on, that's actually one of the things that I've done. I started it a few teams ago, but started making an acronym list so that just one for me, but then also for the new guys. Cause a new guy comes on and they're the same as everybody else. You start talking about things, and especially inside of programmatics and EOD. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. That's 15 pages in itself. And yeah, it's exhausting. So I can only imagine coming from, talking to guys and not really having much exposure to EOD to then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and the other thing about that was I didn't want to if somebody used an acronym in the context of a conversation, I didn't want to interrupt and say, excuse me, I don't understand what the hell it was that you just said. I just wanted to let the conversation flow. And then I'd go back and do the digging a little bit later, which meant that I did a little bit later digging because we got a lot of that stuff. But it was pretty much an interesting experience trying to figure out some of the things that were going on.
There were lots of expletives deleted, expressed during that process. Not another
but
one.
Not too many. We wanted to keep it genuine.
Right. when talking to the families, obviously their experiences come across and how they viewed deployments and just the personalities and whatnot. But was there much discussion about kind of what we're talking about right here, like the families not even realizing
Oh,
or not knowing?
absolutely. Absolutely. I remember one wife, being adamant that she said, my family, my friends would ask, well, where is he? What's he doing? And she would say, I don't know. And they thought that I meant, I can't tell you. She said, I truly didn't know. And
Yeah,
several of the wives said, we're grateful we didn't know exactly, because anytime a news item came on, they didn't have to think, oh God, he's there, that's him, what's happened. So they, there's pluses and minuses, with that information. I mean, as one wife had said, she said, you've got to be strong, you've got to be independent, you have to wear your big girl panties, constantly. And she said the support mostly, and this is true for many of them, not all, was with each other,
yeah,
both on locked Facebook pages. Thank God. That's a good use of Facebook,
absolutely.
where they could go and they could just say, is your husband doing this? My husband's doing, where they could just get some feedback and some commiseration, about what they were going through. And I know you have read this book, so you've heard what the wives have said.
Right.
I didn't hold back with what they said. And I think it's, again, so important to emphasize, we wrote the book. We did not write the stories. These are the words of the warriors and their families. And it was very important for us to honor what they said and for us to present that in a way that, was readable. But
Right.
no words were changed. These are, what do we call it? Non what?
I don't know, but I just want to amplify that and say that uh, I guess, and just to say it in a slightly different way, the most important thing about this book is not that we wrote it. It's not about us. It's about the people that stepped up,
Yeah.
had the initiative and the courage and the cooperative sense to tell their stories so that folks could see that. So as you said,
Yeah.
the
Right.
stories are in their own words. We made some minor grammatical changes if that was necessary. We explain that somewhere in the preface or the introduction to the book. Sometimes the technology failed us during a conversation, and we would have to recreate what we thought was happening based on the context before and after, whenever some portion of the phone call may have been dropped. But mostly, 99%, 99.5% of what's in the book.
Who's counting?
Yeah. That's directly from the words of the folks that we interviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing about that I wanted to mention is that there are warriors, there were operators and technicians whose wives did not want to talk, who had children who weren't interested, in talking, or had parents or siblings who weren't interested in talking. There were wives that I spoke with whose husbands didn't want to be interviewed. I might interview a wife that a husband had said, yes, my wife would love to talk with you. Yes, my adult children would love to talk with you. But I would be speaking with a wife, and she would say, "Oh, you need to talk to, she can tell you the all the stories. She's been." And so I would speak with that wife, and she would say, my husband he doesn't talk. He doesn't
Yeah.
talk. Most interestingly about that, one of the reviews that we have on this book is from one of the husbands who was not interviewed, who read the book and gave a thumbs up
Yeah.
on accuracy and appreciation. So we really appreciate that.
You guys are pretty, I guess, one of the words that we heard frequently mentioned was maybe two: humility and being humble, same thing. We get that. We understood that. We recognize that this was not about beating your chest and saying, "Hey, man, we're great. Not only are we great, but we're better than everybody else." It was the opposite. We heard that all the other EOD warfighters and all the other services, we all make the same commitments. We all do the same job. Just that Navy does it in a different way. We're part of a larger effort, playing on the same team. We all have the same goals, and we really get the unsung idea here. But for us, we wanted to sort of we wanted to blow that up, to use an EOD metaphor. We wanted
Yeah.
we wanted to get the word out about who you are and what you do, because we think that's important. And for me, having taught some history for a while, what EOD did during the last 30 years is an important part of the historical record. And
Yeah.
so the stories that are in this book, we hope, will comprise some small portion of that historical record.
You talked about the way you wrote the book. It obviously, it's not like a normal novel style read. And it makes sense as you're talking about how you put it together. But how did when you first started thinking about writing the book and doing the interviews, did you have that idea all along, or how'd you come to that conclusion to write it this way?
So what we did initially was Joe set up an outline of interview questions for the warriors, as I did the same for family members, different ones for spouses, for parents, for siblings, and for adult children. And by the way, adult children, we interviewed kids who were 14 to 24.
And with permission from
with permission,
parents.
Obviously, not if they were 18 and over, but
Right.
so and they were thrilled to be a part of that. But oh dear, what was the question?
The question was, how did we put it together?
Yes.
About
Okay, so we did our outlines, and then we reviewed our outlines with each other, and then we use that as a basis for the questions. The questions themselves would lead to either very open conversations that Joe will mention here in a minute, or they would lead to from question, to question, with mostly with family members. What happened was, as we were going through those transcriptions, we could see themes that came about as a result of the questions and as a result of the ongoing conversations that some of the warriors and family members had. When we had those, we had so much information. Then we thought, let's take a look at this. How do we present this in a way that we're not tracking a particular operator? Because this wasn't about focusing on an operator, right? Or focusing on a family member. It was focusing on the community and what life was for the community. So the themes we would pull out, for instance, you could see there was leadership. I'll just pull that one out. And we would go through the transcriptions and look at all of those conversations that were about leadership, and then present them within that chapter on leadership, per operator and what the operator had to say, and hopefully having that flow, into getting all of those pieces that were described about leadership.
Right. And sometimes, for instance, we have a chapter that's entitled, I Would Rather Live This Way Than Any Other. That was a direct quote from one of the guys that I interviewed. And as I went through all of the transcriptions, I found pretty much sections from every guy that I talked to who didn't say that specifically, but the ideas were so related and so common that framed the chapter, I Would Rather Live This Way Than Any Other. And we did that with each chapter. So each chapter represents a sort of a different theme. I will say, with the exception of chapter 3, which Paula wrote about the history of
A brief history.
Navy EOD and UDT and Navy SEALs, and Draper Kaufman. Paula insisted that she write that chapter.
It took me 1 year to write that chapter.
It's only 4 pages long.
No. We all know that the hardest thing is to bring a whole lot of information and to bring it down into a readable piece. And the reason that I insisted, Mr. Shaffer, is that Joe has a tremendous military background, both in his work and his volunteering and in his teaching. And I do not. Mine is anecdotal mostly. My father was Seabees because he couldn't get into the Navy because he was colorblind during World War II. But I really felt that I had to get a better grasp of Navy EOD. And so I went with, research through Navy and through the library to study Draper Kaufman, and who was an absolutely fascinating individual. His book is the book about him is referenced in chapter 3 by his sister, Elizabeth Kaufman Bush. And, so many of the attributes about this very unusual man are also attributes of you all in EOD. That loyalty, that independence, that fierce need to find the answer right now, that being right in the bubble and being within that bubble to solve that issue. All of those pieces, the determination, this intelligence, the sacrifice, the team member piece, all of that, is embodied in him. So that was fun, to do a brief history.
Yeah. When we go through school, we get a little bit of, the background and the history of it, and that it's very interesting the way it started and how it developed, and it makes a lot of sense how the same person started the SEALs and EOD, because it really did it makes sense. They tie so well together, which is probably why we still work very closely together right now. Oh man, I had a question and I can't remember what
I know.
it was now.
We're all there, right?
This never happens
It's
to
our
us.
life.
Never.
You all have kind of answered this already, but prior to writing the book, how much did you know about EOD? And I ask this because, like my friend, well, funny story. My friends, who some of them were close friends, I talked to quite frequently, the ones that I, knew before the military. When Osama bin Laden was killed, they were 100% certain that I was the one that did it. Yeah. Then they thought that I was a Navy SEAL. And I was like, I've talked to you guys about this.
I know, right?
So I ask in terms of, I think some people know what EOD is. Some people know some of the things, but for you all, obviously, when you were looking for a book and there wasn't one on it, so I'm assuming that there wasn't a ton of detailed knowledge. But did you have like an overview of kind of what EOD was?
Joe did. I did not.
Yeah.
When my son said, "Ma, I'm going EOD," I said, "What is EOD?"
Yeah.
And he told me, and I said, "You have got to be kidding me."
That's not what you said.
And but I got it. I understood it. So no, I did not. I mean, I knew that there was mine, removal, and there was bomb disposal, but I didn't know either the bigger EOD or the smaller Navy EOD community at all.
Yeah, and I would say that what we heard from your son was mostly apocryphal and extremely limited. He did not want to disclose anything to us that should not have been disclosed, and he didn't. So when we started this, we almost were at ground zero for both of us. So we learned a lot.
It's interesting that you say it that way, and I think that's a good representation of most of the people that I'm close with, family members and whatnot. When I do start to describe things, they'll look at me and they'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh, that's right. Cause I haven't explained anything,
Right, exactly.
But also it's, you mentioned a little bit ago how we are good at being quiet. One of the reasons why I started this podcast, and actually it was very, for me, it was perfect timing, your book coming out, because as you already know, I've reached out to people because of the book to try to bring them on the podcast. But one of the things that I've kind of decided or thought about is that while keeping the humility in it, like what we do does need to be shared, because without that, you look at a bunch of the other organizations and some of them are large. And when things happen to people in the communities, when you have organizations that are that large on the outside, they can provide a lot of funds to get people places that they need to, and to help people out. And, NSOF, it's only started just a little while ago, but they're growing. And that is an excellent resource, but it's hard to get people to donate money to something they don't know anything about, and to people that don't want to talk about it.
Right.
So
no, that's right.
I think there's the balance. The hard part is finding that balance between sharing the story without getting that puffed up chest with,
exactly.
I am the best.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah. We just met a wonderful woman, and she didn't know about the book. We talked about it. She ordered it immediately, and she said, "I'll do anything to support the military in whatever way." So we told her about both foundations, NSOF and EOD Warrior Foundation. And not only did she buy the book, but she said she will look them up and she'll make major donations to both.
That's excellent.
Because she didn't know, she didn't know. May I read something just real fast?
Sure.
Shaffer?
No, you can't.
I can't?
No.
All right. So, well, I'm going to anyway.
Okay.
That's how we roll.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Joe Palanin said in chapter 9 of the book that I think pertains to what we're talking about here, he said 98% of our population have no clue what it's like, have no appreciation for what the military family goes through. That is something that we must overcome. We absolutely must overcome. It can't be a select group of people who say, okay, we got it. We understand it, the military. That's good enough. Being a quiet professional is good. Not caring who takes the credit and being humble and being selfless is good. But at the same time, tell the stories of these families because they're the ones sacrificing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I heard a lot in talking to guys in the community about being selfless and humble. I mean, our leaders and leadership chapter, there are all sorts of mentions of that. And it was a privilege, I think, for both of us to try to spread the word about who you guys are and why you do what you do. So, humility, you can only take that so far, I think. When we had a conversation with Captain Rojas, and he said, one of the things that I would hope that your book does is bring people in off the street who are smart and dedicated and committed and who are willing to do this work rather than just waiting for people to ring out of buds. We need to recruit more people, and maybe your book will help achieve that goal. And certainly that struck a nerve with both of us. If there's a way that this will help do that, great.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely will, because when you think of, I would say a large percentage of the people that go to Buds because they pick up a book in the military section of Barnes and Nobles or, whatever bookstore, and they start reading about, that, but they also see Navy SEALs on there, right? And they've heard about who they were. So getting the word out about who these Navy EOD guys are, and then having a place to go read about the things that they can do. And, for me, I didn't know what EOD was when I came in. I was one of those people that actually rang out of buds, but,
sure.
It's, and I'll freely admit this, back then, even if I had known about EOD, it would have been in the way, my family knew about EOD when I first joined. They knew the 3 letters. They knew 1 or 2 of what those letters meant. They still ask me what EOD stands for, but, I wouldn't have known what all we do. Right. And now, all the different things that I've done, and I don't even know how many countries. It's probably 15 to 20 different countries that I've been to, and working in various capacities in each of them. It's those kind of things that, okay, that opens your aperture. And you're like, wait a minute, there's a lot that we can do, but without a book that shares that, without something that, guides people into that, and you're going to pick up the book about what you know, and you're going to try and go for that. Right.
Well, I hope we get to be as successful as Dick Couch. I'll tell you that. That would be a nice thing for us and for the foundations and for the community as well. One of the guys said very early on in one of the interviews that I did, EOD is the best kept secret, not just in the Navy, but in the military. He said, I have the opportunity to do so many things, to learn so many different things, to go to the national labs and the national nuclear labs in New Mexico, and to learn free fall and all these other training evolutions that you all have.
Do security details.
The Secret Service work. I mean, just all of that stuff just presents so many great opportunities for you. And if you don't know about it, if it's not, I hate to use the word marketed, but that's what somebody said to us. The SEALs have done a great job marketing themselves. And that's great, as it should be. It would be nice if the EOD community had some of that as well. Not that that's a systemic problem, just that that's the way it is.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's without marketing. Yeah. You only have people who stumble across it. And it's funny because up to now, several of the people in the podcast, basically they'll say, I accidentally joined EOD.
Yeah. Right.
They came in from one thing. And there's a couple people that literally, they thought they were supposed to go to Buds, and they were like, why am I at EOD school?
Yeah. I think Bill might have been one of those guys. When Bill Nesbitt talked to us, he said, I thought I had orders to Buds, and I showed up in Coronado, and they said, we're going to change whatever paperwork that got you here. You need to go to EOD school.
But Bill also said that he would tell people he was Navy EOD, and they'd say, "Oh, come on, you're a SEAL." He said, "No, I he wind up arguing about it." You know?
We actually heard that from several guys.
We did. Yeah.
That's funny.
There's one other piece here. If I may,
absolutely.
Being the reader that I am, but it's also a piece of the book, so it's important. So this is in chapter 1. It's virtually impossible to express the scope and magnitude of the work performed by these EOD warfighters. working hand in hand with other U.S. Navy elements and partner forces. As Lee, wife of a Navy EOD operator who has served more than 2 decades, explained, quote, "We have a friend who is a SEAL, and he so looks up to my husband. When people talk about Navy SEALs, they say, wow, they're the best. But the way our friend talks about Navy EOD, he says, damn, I wish I would have gone EOD because you guys are an elite group of people. The fact that we play well with others, Army Rangers, other special forces, I mean, we need someone to do that. And when the shit hits the fan, you want the guy who's setting explosives and taking them apart to really be on his A game. You can't go anywhere without Navy EOD. Lee continued to laud the community's ability to transfer, to generalize what its team members learn into other situations. She concluded, praising her husband's ethos. I can do this. I can do anything.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah.
There's your
Yeah.
recruiting.
Yeah, that's you,
right?
baby.
There's your recruiting. It's a little long for a poster, but
Yeah, right.
For each of you, after you wrote as you wrote the book, after you wrote the book, you put it together. Was there anything that you learned that, you said you learned a lot, but was there anything that you learned that you were kind of shocked about, whether it was from the family perspective side or the active duty EOD side, that what they did, how they worked, what they thought about it, anything that was kind of just more of like a shock? Like, I had no idea that would be something.
Well, let me start off. Maybe the first thing that comes to mind for me is that when some of the guys described going to Iraq early on in unarmored Humvees, maybe with no doors on them, when they were piling sandbags on their vehicles to try to protect themselves from IEDs, and various other. I mean, there's always, I think, probably at the start of any shooting war, there's a lag between what's happening and the information that previously existed. And I think I was a little bit taken aback by that. I think I would have expected that our military would have been a little more forward thinking than it was. And obviously you can't anticipate all of the threats that are coming to you. If you could, you probably wouldn't have to worry about fighting wars ever again. But the lag time between the reality on the ground and the response, not just with Navy EOD necessarily, but within maybe the larger military, was a little shocking to me. The guys would find themselves in situations where they were not well prepared, maybe in a physical sense, to deal with the threat that they were facing. And so that was a little shocking. Of course, then, obviously, the resources were reallocated to provide more protection for folks. The robots were introduced instead of sending people downrange in bomb suits. Those kinds of things took place, but I was a little taken aback by that.
And mine would have been truly the willingness of officers or higher ups to accept the advice of enlisted, and lower officers. That there were times when, you think of military as being a very structured, everything is sort of done by the book. And what the interviews taught me, and also, quite frankly, Draper Kaufman's experience, is that leadership comes from all areas, and that yes, there was not always respect, there was not always great leadership, but that it seemed there was more of a willingness to sort of open those lines where junior officers or enlisted could make decisions, could give advice, could offer right information
Solutions.
or knowledge, and that would be received well.
Which is pretty cool. I think that
Yeah.
that really speaks to the strength of the leadership in the main. We, of course, heard about some bad leadership, and we had probably one or two guys who said, I learned as much from bad leaders as I learned from
right,
good leaders,
exactly.
and that was certainly my experience in the military. You would hope that you would have more of the good leaders than the poor leaders, but that's not always going to be the case. But the idea that solving a problem doesn't come from one particular source, it comes from perhaps different levels. And one of the books that we refer to in our book is called Turn the Ship Around, and it's about a commander who takes over a submarine in the naval force that is poor performance pretty much throughout, bad retention of officers and enlisted. People aren't interested in staying in the military. They move on out of that boat as quickly as possible, and they have the worst performance within the given area that they're in. And so his approach to that is, I can't make all of the decisions. I'm one person. I shouldn't be making all the decisions. So what I want to do is build an ethos of leadership. Every person learns how to become a leader. Every person takes responsibility for what they do. So rather than waiting to get orders, I want my people to say, this is my intention. I intend to take the boat to 75 feet, rather than waiting for the captain or somebody else to give the order, take the boat to 75 feet, when everyone knows that that's something that has to happen in that scenario. So I was really glad to hear that, and clearly that's something that and you'll be able to tell us whether or not you think that's the case more often than not within EOD. Does that sound right to you?
It does, and I think it's one of those areas where it has to be that way, because you're in training and in normal operations, everything is geared toward that worst case scenario. And in that worst case scenario, you can't have somebody that's seeing the problem turn and then take the time to explain everything that they're seeing, give their recommendation, wait for the yes or no. If it's a no, wait for the new plan, because by the time all that happens, you're dead many times over.
Right.
And I think because of that, and because that's always our focus, we're able to do that. And I think a lot of times in EOD, even in the in the programmatic side, there's a look towards the guys who are downrange, who are actively doing things. There's emails that come out all the time. Hey, we want junior people, first, second tour guys, girls, to come out and evaluate this thing, give recommendations. Why? Because they're the ones that are physically doing the things.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me just, I know you probably want to jump in with something here, but
Okay.
Joe Polanin, and I think it's in the book, certainly it's in the transcript, tells a story about watching guys who are getting ready to deploy, and they're having their final sort of inspection. It's 2:00 in the morning. Everybody's exhausted. And Tyler Trahan, who unfortunately was killed later, at one point, they're trying to deal with a problem that needs to be solved. And the senior chief says to do X, Y, and Z. And this young EOD tech, who's, maybe an E4 or something, E3, E4, he says, senior, I think that's not right. And the chief goes on and he continues to say and do whatever he wants to have done. And so this young man 2 or 3 times says, senior, I think you need to slow down and think about this from a different perspective. And And that person, whoever, and Joe didn't say who it was, stops, thinks about it, reconsiders, and says, "You're right. I wasn't thinking clearly about it." And so that's when Joe says that at that moment, I know that they are ready to go. They are prepared for deployment. And I just thought that was a pretty amazing example of what we were talking about, that it's not top down. Sometimes it's bottom up, and sometimes the ideas come from wherever. As long as the problem gets solved, that's an incredibly amazing approach to that. And Sean Bonowitz mentions that too when he talks about the difference between sort of the hierarchical approach that the Germans had in the military in World War II, and the Americans with this sort of loosey-goosey, laissez-faire, let's fly by the seat of our pants. So which one would you have picked beforehand to be successful? And most people might have said, well, the German army is much more organized. They're more rigidified. Their systems are more A to Z figured out, and these Americans are just kind of winging it. Well, which one turned out to be, and that's clearly not the only thing that accounted for the success of the Americans and the Allies in World War II, but that was certainly part of the equation.
Another piece with me in terms of learning the children, the adult children, especially the 20-somethings, I was amazed at, well, let me start with the teenagers. I was truly amazed at the ability for these young adults to both speak about their experiences with a depth of perception, and honor. And then with the 20-somethings, whatever line of work, they had taken, whether they were sort of pro-military or not so sure about the military, they had nothing but the deepest respect, gratitude for the work of their dads and Navy EOD community.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, wow, talk about surviving well. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember talking not too long ago with somebody, and I think we used to say, or I used to hear and regurgitate, or also say that EOD kind of tends to develop this type of person that is good in a bunch of different aspects, whether it's from the job side, from the critical fast thinking side, decision making, to the discipline side for the kids, which we all can probably attest. I didn't like it when I was a kid, but it's really paid off through my older years. But I think something that's interesting is as I thought about it more, I think it's people that are that way tend to gravitate towards this job, and then all those already natural skills and instincts just get honed through the years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very good observation. Yeah,
absolutely.
But with the book, how was, and I know a little bit of this answer, how was the promotion side of things going? How difficult has that been, and was it expected? Yeah.
Okay, so let's just say, because we've already told you we're old. Oh, excuse me, we're old school.
Older.
Our initial hope was to publish hard copy, with traditional publishing, and going down that road, we learned that even we had a couple of potential interests, but we were looking at 2024 at the earliest to get the book out because of publication, schedules. Thank you. And So, we thought, well, we both are well-read people. We can do our own editing. We can. So Joe went to a seminar on self-publishing. And so we decided that our best bet really was to go Amazon.com for self-publishing. And that was two reasons. One, they're excellent with not promotion. Well, I'll come to that, but with putting it together and keeping organized record of everything. And then two, the royalties, the percentage is better. And so that meant that we could donate more money because 50%, of what we receive goes to the foundations. So there were lots of glitches, in terms of finally having that done. But our marriage survived. More importantly, no, that's important. Our book made it, and but the other side of it, then of course, is we have to do all our own marketing. So we set up a plan, and it's an ongoing piece. We started with who we know, and then came out into the community, and then kind of the larger community, and with your help with this, quite frankly, a broader community. But we're constantly looking for ways to have magazine articles, news articles, radio interviews, podcasts, whatever we can do. We're going to universities, we're going to conferences, we'll keynote, and talk about the book. And I do want to, let me just say before I forget this, I think that there's a broader audience than just people who are interested in military history. Obviously, that's our targeted audience, because this really is about military history, and it's also about a very special, group that is virtually unknown. But the broader audience, I'm from university, teachers, teaching teachers. And so many of my cohorts don't have military experience, and yet they have been blown away by the book and by what they've learned from the book, because it's a human story. Right. And it's first person narrative, it's interviews, and so they can immediately attach emotionally, to what's happening with people. And they've just said, we had no idea. And they have gotten the word out and spread the word to get others to read, so that, more people, would have a sense of not just Navy EOD, but what military families endure and have endured. Yeah.
I don't think we anticipated well enough how much effort would be required in terms of marketing. And we do need to emphasize that the book is print on demand. So when you order a book, there aren't 10,000 copies of this book sitting in a warehouse somewhere. It gets printed and shipped to you within 2 or 3 days, depending on whether or not you have Amazon Prime. So the marketing piece for us is an ongoing, also learning experience. We're doing as much as we can at our end to try to get the word out about the book. Obviously, things like this will really help. But I don't think we anticipated perhaps as well as we should have how much effort was going to be required after we got finished with the manuscript. But it's an ongoing process. We're going to continue to push. We hope to do another podcast here before too long with Maria at EOD Warrior Foundation. Excellent. And so the more we spread the word, we hope then not just folks within the EOD community or their families, but the word gets out to a larger audience, because that's the thing that's going to make the difference, not just in terms of selling the book, but more importantly, getting the word out about who you guys are and what it is that you do.
Right. I didn't realize that it was a print to order. Now you can, thinking about it, if you change your description a little, you can say that you can get a custom book,
I
because
like
if it's
this.
print to order, it's custom.
Ooh,
I like
that's
it.
good. I
But
like
we
it.
will say, if, people just let us know, and then we would be happy to do a plate, with an autograph, uh,
Okay.
so that we can get that, to
Yeah,
folks. Anybody who's nearby or that we're traveling, we've already done that, and we'll be happy
that's
to
awesome.
sign. So,
Yeah, we're doing a big road trip in July. We're hoping to go to there's an EOD themed bar in Albuquerque called Bombs Away. I don't know if you've heard about
Yeah.
that. There's I guess he's an Air Force EOD guy. So I'm going to spread the word for anybody
before we go,
before we go, that anybody in New Mexico who wants to buy me a beer, we're going to be at Bombs Away at such and such a day and time, and we'll be glad to sign books.
right.
I don't know what the signatures will look like after a couple of beers, but
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, in your discussions with the foundations and coming up with donating to them, how was that? How was it reaching out to the foundations and talking to?
They've been wonderful. Of course, Frank Morneau is he's head of NSOF now, and Susanna Fisher is the executive director, and she has been back and forth with looking at ways that NSOF can spread the word. And then Nicole Motzek, I hope I'm saying that correctly. She's executive director at EOD Warrior Foundation. She said, anything that I can do, let us know. What Joe and I have done is we've set up quarterly distributions for the foundations. So our first distribution was in January, and April will be the next one. And I'm hoping that, that will sort of keep us fresh in terms of let's keep the word out.
Yeah.
About this. And by the way, just a huge thank you to Frank Morneau for a beautiful foreword that he did, for the book. He was very gracious, and we are most appreciative,
Yeah.
that he was so forthcoming with basically praise, for this finally being done, and being done well.
And he asked, before he wrote the foreword, he wanted to see, we'd send him a couple of chapters, and then he wrote back and said, okay, send me a few more chapters. And we
A
did
couple
that.
more.
We did that 3 or 4 times and sent him pretty much the whole damn manuscript at some point.
Right.
And there are a couple of references to Admiral Morneau in the book, and both of them he is referred to as a man among men, and we absolutely believe that. So we were extremely grateful to have him do the foreword to the book. Mm-hmm. And I think that's made a significant difference when we're able to reach out to people and say, here's our book. This is what it's about. Oh, and by the way, Admiral Morneau said this about the book in the foreword. And I think that resonates with an awful lot of folks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would agree. I would agree that having him on there is, for those in the EOD community, it's a very well known and respected name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also, I should have mentioned this back when we were originally talking about how the book was set up, but looking for those who don't know who you are, how you set it up is an excellent way.
Thank you.
Thinking objectively of just, because I know us EOD techs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Navy EOD techs.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we get a little weird. And if we don't, we're very good at, when we talk to somebody, oh, here's the next person. Like you were saying with this book, that's usually how a master board goes. When we do our master boards, we talk to somebody about a scenario, and then my recommendation to people is ask them, whoever you're talking to, ask them if they have anybody else that can help you with that area. And anytime you ask that, yep, here's another person, here's this person, here's what they could probably provide you. And we're good at throwing names around. But we're bad at listening to people we don't know. But the way the book is set up, it's excellent, because you have the theme, right?
Mhm.
And then you have, here's the validation for why
Right.
there's that
Exactly.
theme.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that was very interesting to me. So it wasn't even just the stories, which the stories are awesome and I enjoy those, but it was kind of that's something that I think
That's good to hear.
some books miss, you know, is you, it's a lot of talk about why something is a certain way, especially when it comes to a group of people or an organization. But then the thing that's missed is, here's why that thought is out there. And, you know, so I really enjoyed that part, that there's a lot of validation to
That's
everything.
awesome.
Well, we knew that we could not tell the story from one person's perspective all the way through, and then another person's perspective all the way through.
Yeah.
We had to break it up, and we had to take those thematic portions from each individual and plug them into the chapters. It does make it maybe a little more difficult to read. Paula tried, and this is one of the nightmares we had when it came to formatting the book, is that Paula decided, look, if you want to follow Scott Moneypenny, I'm going to go from A to Z. I'm going to go through each reference to Scott Moneypenny and mark that in the back of the book next to, and what page number, where can I find everything that Scott Moneypenny said, page 7, page 29, page 357, whatever. She did that for every single person. And then we discovered that every time we did that, it changed the formatting of the manuscript. And after having done it about 10 times.
Yeah. Oh, and hours each time.
Yeah.
Because because you couldn't just you had to do it manually, because sometimes someone would mention somebody's name and we were trying to have the words of that particular person. Joe looked at me and said, "Why are we doing this?"
Well, it really made sense, because there are some people that I'm sure wanted to read the book, and they wanted to read it from a person's perspective from A to Z, and so this would have helped
Give them that
person.
choice.
There was just no way to do it without one of us killing the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's true.
That was the formatting nightmare, and at some point we just decided, okay,
Joe decided.
Yeah, I did. I got to decide. Okay, so we just said, oh, we're not going to do that. If somebody's interested in doing that, a reader can take the time to follow as he or she wishes.
Find the name. Find the name.
Right.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it was too much.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like I said, I enjoy it. Honestly, for me too, the other piece is I'm one of those weird people who like to read but find it hard to read. So it was a great way for me to not feel like I'm stopping in the middle of a story.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
So I could choose a chapter, go for it, read that chapter, and then, you know, come back to it. And it wasn't like I have to reread to remember where I'm at. You know, I can just move on.
We're really glad to hear that, because we did have the sense that, okay, some people are going to really struggle with this, but that's the positive side of that, is that, and we recognize that this is not a book that you read starting from page 1 right straight through to page 327 or whatever. This is something that is going to require some effort on the part of the reader.
Right.
And
we had a review. Actually, it was a column that was done in a national
blog.
I'd sort of say POG. I knew that was wrong.
Yeah.
She's a non-military reader, and she said, it is first a fascinating but short history of Navy EOD, starting with a brief biography of Admiral Draper Kaufman, considered the father of both Navy EOD and Navy SEALs. But the heart and soul of the book are the dozens of in-depth interviews with the extraordinary men and women of the EOD, including the experiences of their families. You need to read these vignettes a few at a time and linger over the mind-boggling personal sacrifices, stories told in the participants' own words. These men and their families will live in your head for some time to come.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying, and that really encapsulates
Sure.
what
What you just said,
was
yeah.
we had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's excellent. Is there anything else that you would like to just kind of discuss or inform anybody about?
Yeah, absolutely. We do need to mention that the book is only available at amazon.com/books. If you type in, when you get to that, if you go to amazon.com/books, there's a search field at the top of your screen, and you can type in Amazon, or you can type in Unsung Quiet Voices, and it'll take you immediately to the link for the book. That's where the purchase can be done.
Or your Facebook.
Yeah, I also have an Unsung Quiet Voices of US Navy's EOD Warriors and Their Families Facebook page, which will also take you to the link. We do want to emphasize and re-emphasize that we're splitting 50% of the profit from sales with Navy Special Operations Foundation and EOD Warrior Foundation. We think everybody needs to know that, especially people within the community. When you buy a book, you're helping support both those foundations. We do want to emphasize again, or at least I do, that this is not about us. We were privileged to do this. It's about you guys and your community and your family. And the book is in your words. And that's incredibly important to both of us, I think.
And then I wanted to share, I was very concerned about what our interviewees had to say about the book, because that it was most important, to me. How do you feel about, the work that you've done, within this volume? One wife said, "Wow, what a beautiful, beautiful book. Thank you. I've laughed and cried dozens of times. It's stories I didn't even realize I needed to read. Thank you for validating our plights, joys, and resilience." And then another from a wife whose husband we did not interview, we interviewed the wife, said, "We are so proud of you all. It's a beautiful, informative, special book. My husband read it and passed it among the family."
I wish you just bought several copies. That would have been better.
You're so bad, Shaffer. And then one military reader review said, "What sets this book apart is the author's ability to capture the emotional and psychological toll of the work of EOD warriors. The stories shared in this book are raw and honest, and they do an excellent job of showcasing these individuals' unwavering resilience and courage. The writing style is engaging and accessible, making it an excellent read for anyone interested in military history or the sacrifices made by our service members." So
I like it.
That makes us feel good, because that's somebody that we interviewed and spent a lot of time giving us his stories. So we really appreciate that.
That's great.
Yeah.
One thing I'll say is, you said the book is not about you. I don't know if you will necessarily agree, but I think that the thing that Navy EOD needed was you, though, because most of us wouldn't actually do this.
Right.
And it's one of the things that I think needs to be done to inform people about the community. So I really appreciate you guys spending the time and going through all the challenges. I do really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll continue.
That means a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on and talking with us. And this is great.
You can bleep out all the bad words I use.
No, I'm the only one, but they weren't mine. They were somebody else.
Yeah. It was quotes.
Yeah, that's it. There you go.
We thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share.